You are listening to How to Get Over Your Ex, episode number 200, Signs You're Over Your Ex. Welcome to How to Get Over Your Ex, a podcast on getting over your ex without it just taking time. I'm your host, breakup coach Dorothy. Let's turn your pain into power and your heartbreak into happy. Hello, beautiful brave hearts. How is everyone doing? I cannot believe we are on episode number 200. That just snuck right up on me. I'm like, wow, 200 episodes. And for some reason, I'm like, 200. A part of me is like, we're only at 200. We've been doing this since 2020. It's been 3 years. But also, like, there's only 52 weeks in a year. So that makes a lot of sense, right? So I was doing some research. I feel like a refreshed human lately. I've been kind of going back to the basics as a business owner and exploring a lot of the things that I explored when I very first started my journey as a breakup coach. And I did some research and I got to meet 30 of you. 10 of them were clients that I've already worked with, so I'm familiar with you from the Get Over Your Ex program. And then 20 of you were actually podcast listeners that I've never met before. So it was really, really fun just meeting you, talking about what you've learned on the podcast and how you've applied it, struggles that you've found, frustrating things about your breakup. So if you're listening and you're one of those 20 that I met, it was so fun, so great to meet you. Thank you so much for your time again. So I was doing research for a number of reasons as we undergo some changes in my business. And I really noticed something that I thought was really, really cool is that there are like 3 sets of or groups of people that I help and kind of 3 points at which maybe they're like 3 phases that I notice all of these individuals had either gone through or were in. And it was really fascinating. So the first kind of phase were those of you who are in urgent emotions, right? Like you're really struggling. The breakup just happened perhaps, or maybe the breakup happened a long time ago, but you're still in this like place of struggling in deep pain, deep devastation, loss, panic, depression. This is the stage where you're not really functioning in the world. Like you're in so much pain that you're physically ill, you're not eating, you're not sleeping, you're not working. Or if you do go to work, you go to work and you're not actually getting work completed. I was talking to one of the individuals who signed up for the program, and she had mentioned that was like one of her biggest things was she wasn't able to focus at work, and that was kind of like her bread and butter. That meant everything to her. So that's what, pushed her and urged her to join and find a solution to this. So there's that kind of section of you who might be in urgent emotions, that panic, that overwhelm. It just is really debilitating. And I have so much compassion for that. And I have so much compassion for those of you who are in that phase. It hurts. Like it's physically ill and you're waking up every day like you're waking up into a nightmare, and it's just the worst experience ever. And I'm here for you. And I hope that if this is the first time you're listening to the podcast, you stick with the podcast, you listen to these episodes, and you move away from that, or you come get help with me specifically. So the second group of people who are individuals who are functioning, like you're out of that panic stage, you're out of the urgent emotions, you're sleeping and you're eating and you're going to work again and you're not in serious pain. You might still have anger and frustration and sadness, but you're able to at least just function in the world. However, you notice that there are patterns you want to change in your life. You want to do things differently and you want to have different results, right? You want to up level in a way that you haven't yet, or at least you haven't done in a long time. The third group of people that I noticed myself talking with who have either listened to the podcast or worked with me were people that would consider themselves pretty much over their ex, but not really living their bigger and better life. They feel kind of stuck, they feel stagnant or mediocre, and even though they consider themselves pretty much over their ex, I personally wouldn't necessarily consider them over their ex based on the behaviors they were participating in, or the lack of excitement that they had about their future. And the cool thing about that, and the cool thing about just seeing these three categories of individuals that, I notice people signing up for my program, or I notice people listening to the podcast from all of these different three phases. What I thought was really interesting and something that we should really talk about is, how do we know if we're over our ex? Because every time I ask the question to individuals like, are you over your ex? The only ones who were really clear were the people that had done my program before, just because that's something that I figure out in the beginning. But I was like, for those of you who've listened to the podcast, I want to help you with this. How do we know if you're over your ex? And how do you, if you are in that group where you're like almost over your ex, I'm like, listen to this episode. I'm going to show you exactly how to finish that last 10%. And also, for those of you who are just getting started, if I can catch you in the beginning of your journey and help you figure out how will I know I'm over my ex, you're going to be in a better spot than if you didn't do this work and you were trying to get over your ex. So I don't know, it opened up my eyes to kind of a gap that I want to make sure to address in the podcast and help all of you with, okay? So how do we know if we're over our ex? And I think there are many brave hearts who still listen to the podcast, even though they consider themselves over their ex. And first off, I just want to say thank you. I love you. And that's so cool. And I just love you so much. I feel like we're best friends, right? And then some of you, like I mentioned, that you're 90% there, but you're not fully over your ex. And I want to talk about how important that last 10% is. But more importantly, to solve for that, we have to know what it actually means to be over your ex, and how to know you've arrived and that you are over your ex, and you're clear and you're certain and you're confident that, yes, I am over my ex. And like I mentioned, inside of the program, we get really clear about this in the beginning so that you can actually track your progress and know tangibly if you've made progress towards getting over your ex and building a bigger and better life, rather than just guessing. And I think this is really, really important. In business coaching, we do this automatically with things like client signed or revenue, but coaching, when it comes to more emotional things, people aren't used to measuring this unless I think you come from a background of statistics and research and data, which I do. And I literally have a consulting background of measuring learning and development programs for large organizations. And we would measure, yes, of course, sales and numbers, but we also measured things that are technically intangible, like feelings and confidence and skills built and things like that. And so I'm used to measuring this, and I don't think that I realized this doesn't come firsthand for everyone. And I didn't realize this until, again, I was talking to these three different groups, and I noticed a huge gap between those who had gone through the Get Over Your Ex program versus those who had not, and being able to measure and understand if they were fully over their ex. And so I'm like so excited to teach this, you guys. And I love numbers, and I promise you, if you are not a numbers person, I will make this as simple as possible and very relevant to you in a way that you can do it and feel confident in your ability to do it just through this episode, okay? I really like measuring with data and numbers, and it's going to completely change the game in your breakup journey, okay? So here's what we need to do. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to ask yourself, what does it mean to me to be over my ex? Asking that to yourself, right? What does it mean to me to be living a bigger and better life than the one I had with my ex? What do those things mean to you? Because that's going to be so different for each person. And to make sure that it's relevant to you, we have to look at, what does it mean to me? Not what do I think it should mean? What would it mean to other people? But what does it mean to me? And for me, I was probably in the second stage of what we were talking about, that second phase of, I was no longer in the panicked and urgency emotion when I was going through the breakup that I talk about here on the podcast. I was really in the stage of, I'm noticing repeat patterns. And I wasn't super devastated and depressed, but I still had a lot of anger and resentment. So for me, getting over my ex in 2016 really was about no longer feeling angry and resentful. And I wanted to stop making decisions that were trying to get his attention on social media or trying to be still in his life. And I found myself still making decisions not for me, but for him, right? And that to me was what meant being over my ex, was no longer feeling angry and resentful, making decisions for myself and not for him. And when it came to living the bigger and better life, I wanted to know for certain that I could have it without him, no matter who was in my life. And that kind of looked like living where I want to live, making more money than he was. And so that's how I started getting curious about what getting over my ex meant to me. Then to make this measurable, once you get clear about what it means to you to be over your ex and what does it mean to you to live a bigger and better life, you have to make this measurable. And you don't have to, but it's going to make your process so much easier. So to make this measurable, one of the questions that you can ask yourself is, how will I know I've arrived? How will I know that I've arrived at no longer feeling angry and resentful, right? So letting go of that anger and resentment for me meant no longer feeling angry and resentful about the experience. So to measure that, I could easily say that about 90% of the time when my breakup was brought up, I was feeling angry and resentful in that current moment. And I truthfully wanted to feel that 0% of the time. I wanted to say that when my breakup got brought up, I no longer felt angry and resentful. 0% of the time, I felt angry and resentful. And I can honestly say I never feel angry and resentful about my breakup at all. It is mind-blowing for a 26-year-old version of me. No anger, no resentment, literally none. I'm actually probably very grateful. And then perhaps for making decisions, right, I'm starting at, back in 2016, I'd say 5 out of every 5 decisions I was making, decisions that were geared towards him. And I wanted that to be 0 out of 5 decisions. And that's what would mean I was over my ex. Sometimes the result you're trying to create might not be the way to measure it because it includes outside circumstances. And I talk a lot to my clients about, execution goals and measuring those instead of outcome goals, or measuring a feeling instead of your outcome goals. So, for example, making more money than my ex, that would be an outcome goal, right? You could see clear dollar signs to measure that. But there are a lot of factors outside of myself that take place. So my execution goals might have been something like, I'm going to make offers to help people with their breakup, and I'm going to make 90 offers in 90 days. That's something that I have full control over. Or maybe when it came to making more money than my ex, looking at like the root of that and what would it mean for me to make more money than my ex? And at the time it was freedom, it was security, knowing that I was secure and free on my own. I would never need another person to support me or feel kind of tied and attached to someone to be able to make that kind of money. And so maybe 90% of the time, or I guess in the beginning, it would be 0% of the time I was feeling secure about my financial stability, whereas the bigger and better life meant that 90% or 100% of the time I felt financially secure on my own, regardless of who is in or not in my life. And that doesn't mean you don't track actual outcome goals, like actual dollar amounts. I still did that. But I'm also tracking the things that I have full control over so that I know that the things that I do have control over, I am doing those and I am making progress on them. So that's kind of an example of what mine looked like, but I've helped hundreds of thousands of Bravehearts figure out what that looks like for them. So I have a lot of examples, and I want to talk about what are all the signs that you might look at that mean you're over your ex, that you could measure to know for certain that you are there, that 100% you got to this place of being over your ex. So maybe it is how often you think about your ex. You can measure this weekly, you can measure this daily. Most of my clients in the beginning are thinking about their ex daily. So we're looking at how many times a day did you catch yourself thinking about your ex? And so maybe that's 99 times in the day I caught myself thinking about my ex, and eventually I would like that to be, only once a day, and I don't react to it. I don't have a lot of emotion towards it. Or of course, if we're thinking like years down the road, I like to think in 3-month increments because that's how long my clients work with me. So you can do this in 3-month increments. You could do this in a year, but I like to look at just overall, what does being over your ex mean, no matter what time frame we're in, because that gets you clear about, I think when you start tying in time frames, your mind will be like, is that possible or is that not possible? And then it gets stuck in spinning out about that, when the real work is just getting clear about where you are and where you want to go. My clients also love to look at desire and attachment because I've created a scale that's very specific about that, right? So you can measure on a scale from 0 to 10, I desire my ex. 0 being no desire for my ex, 10 being all of the desire for my ex. Same thing with attachment to your ex, attachment to having your ex in your life to create your future. You can look at level of confidence in yourself, level of confidence in your ability to create the life that you want. Feeling free emotionally, mentally, physically from your ex. A lot of my clients love feeling free and they notice themselves feeling free afterwards. And so that's something that they track pretty frequently. Breakup anxiety, relationship anxiety, interest in dating others, indifference. This is probably one of the number one things I notice my clients wanting is emotionally not attached, feeling indifferent during breakup triggers. Like their ex could do something, say something, show up somewhere, interact with them, and they just feel pure indifference and aren't bothered by it. So that's a good one to measure. Excitement for your future. No kind of like lingering pain. Focusing on you more than your ex. I see a natural progression for all my clients when it comes to like, they have a lot of thoughts that are centered around their ex. And as they move through the work together, they notice a lot more of the focus is on them and a lot less about their ex. So you could be measuring that. Acceptance of your breakup, closure, right? Not constantly wondering why or having the what ifs. You've just decided and you feel good in your own answers. Memories is a good one you can measure. You can recall positive memories without feeling overwhelming sadness or nostalgia, right? Self-esteem, worthiness, enoughness, lovability. These things are not tied to your ex, right? They are not affected by the thoughts of your ex or your past relationships. And watching your progress in those areas is a good one as well. Emotional maturity, knowing that your thoughts create your feelings, and not only knowing that, but practicing it, living it, and really like only experiencing the emotions and moving through the emotions that you feel very full in control of those. Feeling secure in yourself to build a bigger and better life. That also kind of coincides with confidence in your ability to create it. And as good as done future, feeling like it's already done, feeling very complete with where you're at, and knowing that your future is going to be available to you regardless of what your ex does. Now, this list is limitless, y'all. Like I just listed some. We just scratched the surface. I could go on for hours talking about all the different things that I've seen brave hearts measure. But what is important to know is that what's important to you may not be on this list, and what's important to others may not be important to you, and that is okay. Don't make that a problem. Really let yourself want what you want when it comes to being over your ex and building the bigger and better life. But getting clear about this ahead of time is key. And when you don't, then there's really just no way for you to measure your actual progress. And a lot of times when you do that, you might be more focused on the gap between you and being over your ex rather than the progress that you've already made. And I want to remind you that what you focus on grows. So when we track actual measurable data and you're looking at how often am I thinking about this person daily, or how, this week on average, how confident did I feel in myself? And you're actually looking at those numbers and reviewing those numbers every day or every week. You're focusing on the progress you're making instead of the lack of progress. And so you're going to create even more and more and more progress, and it just snowballs and it compounds. Now, like I said before, if you're almost over your ex, still do this exercise. It is absolutely important. Still do this for you. What would being over your ex 100% look like, and get clear about where you are now and where you want to go so that you can still, from a measurable place, pinpoint where you are and where you're going so that you can say that you fully arrived. I would love if you could literally just be very clear about that and say, I made very clear goals and I know exactly what it means to me to be over my ex and I've arrived. Like, how cool is that? And you can totally do it. And of course, if you're feeling really far from being over your ex, for sure do this exercise and watch how quickly you'll progress towards your goals when, number one, you know what they are specifically and measurably, right? And number two, you know where you're starting from. Too many people miss that second part. We don't even measure where we are now. We're just so excited to get where we want to go. Oftentimes my clients, when they submit this work, they'll say, I want to not be thinking about my ex. But I'm like, okay, but how often are you thinking about your ex now? And if they missed that piece and it comes to midpoint and they're like, I'm still thinking about my ex 50% of the time, or I'm still thinking about my ex, 5 times a day, but we aren't sure where they started, we can't even see the progress. What if they were thinking about their ex 100 times a day and now they're only thinking about their ex 5 times a day? That is a huge thing to miss, right? Too many people miss that part. And we know where we want to go, but if we just plug into the GPS that we want to go to San Francisco, but we have no idea where we're starting from, how the heck are we going to get there? Getting there from Hawaii looks different from getting there from Asia. And then we could say we're 50% of the trip way through, but if we're in Asia, that's going to look very different than if we're in Hawaii. Just knowing where you're starting from and having that and making it measurable, you guys, this is going to be a game changer. This exercise will completely change the way that you heal and keep track of this. And I'm really excited for you to try it out. This is something that you can use even after your breakup. Now, if you want help doing this, you can always join me inside of the Get Over Your Ex program and get clear about all of this with me. And, you would then be sure you're over your ex in 3 months from now. And I would love, love, love to help you there. But I do know that you can also try this activity on your own. All right, my brave hearts, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe to the How to Get Over Your Ex podcast for more episodes like this. And if you found any of our episodes helpful, we would really love a written review on the Apple Podcast app to help other heartbroken humans turn their pain into power and their heartbreak into happy. I love you so much. I hope you have an amazing day. If you're loving the How to Get Over Your Ex podcast and you want to learn how to get over your ex in 3 months or less to build a life better than the one you thought you had with your ex, I would like to personally invite you to my next group course where we take everything you've learned here on the podcast and apply it to your life. Come check it out at www.lifecoachdorothy.com.